It was supposed to be her moment. One ceremony, one title. The same title every heir's daughter had received since 1953. But when Princess Charlotte walked into the room, her name was missing. And standing in her place was Camilla's granddaughter, wearing the sash, holding the ribbon, and smiling for cameras that had been told this was already approved. No one said a word. Not the aides, not the press, not even the palace, until the royal guard stepped forward. Not with fury, and not with drama. Just a controlled act of protocol enforcement that stopped Camilla in her tracks. Now, before we show you how far she went to erase a royal child and the fallout she never expected to face, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Tap like, hit subscribe, and make sure the bell icon is turned on. Because this wasn't a mistake, it was a replacement, and the guard confronted it head-on. The Heritage Archive Pavilion wasn't the most grand of Windsor's halls, but it carried a distinct reverence. Sandstone pillars, arched windows, and a single chandelier, borrowed from St. George's drawing room. Most people mistook it for a quiet museum annex. But to those in uniform, it was where traditions were quietly handed down. And today, the Crown was preparing to bestow one of those traditions, the title of Young Royal Patron of Children's Literacy. Sergeant Harlan Bryce stood just inside the western threshold, shoulders squared, rifle vertical, the tall black bearskin hat of the Coldstream Guard, crowning his stillness. The doors were not yet open to press, but aides moved briskly between rows of seats and floral stands, adjusting nameplates and testing microphone levels. Bryce's job was not to interfere, but observe, and it was during that quiet half-hour before ceremony that he noticed it. A thick printed program placed on a brass easel at the entrance bore the event's order. Line 4 read clearly, Young Patron Presentation, Maya Asta. Bryce's eyes scanned the line again, not out of confusion, but calculation. Because this title, ceremonial though it may be, had always been handed down the same way. Since 1953, it had passed directly from heir to heir, each child of the future monarch receiving it in a quiet public gesture around their 8th or 9th birthday. Princess Charlotte of Wales was 9. Maya Asta was not just younger, she wasn't even in the line of succession. Bryce's fingers didn't move, but a small pressure formed at the hinge of his jaw. He tracked the movement of aides from the Office of Public Education. 2 looked tense. One leaned toward the floral coordinator and whispered, "Is this change final?" The reply came back flat and low. "Came through this morning from the consort's cipher," another aide muttered. "It was never cleared through Kensington." Bryce kept his eyes on the room. Charlotte and the Princess of Wales had not yet arrived. That at least was still expected. But the guest of honor was already here. Maya Asta, escorted by a Kensington staffer who shouldn't have been assigned to her. The girl was cheerful, oblivious, clutching a red leather booklet. Then came the sound of hard-soled heels. Camila, the Queen Consort, entered, not with press, nor with royal liaison, but alone, flanked only by her 2 most senior aides. She carried a folio with ornate gold trim. Not the seal of the crown, nor Buckingham. It was her personal cipher. Bryce had seen it before during a disputed delegation reshuffle last spring. She approached the front row, surveyed the layout, and tapped one of her aides. "Let's remove that extra seat," she said. "There's no need to crowd the frame." Bryce watched as the seat beside the podium, the one that by all precedent belonged to Princess Charlotte, was quietly wheeled away. Nothing in his posture changed, but behind the stillness of his uniform, something old and exacting had just awakened, and while no rule had been broken yet, the pattern was beginning to form. He kept his gaze forward, 4 paces from the aisle, 2 from the sovereign seal, still silent, still watching. Camilla did not pause for formalities. She rarely did when arriving ahead of cameras. Her coat, deep charcoal with subtle burgundy piping, fanned behind her as she walked briskly toward the center aisle of the Heritage Archive Pavilion, speaking low to the aide on her left. Neither carried the official folder of protocol clearance. Neither stopped to acknowledge the stage coordinator or the royal press secretary waiting by the East Arch. Sergeant Harlan Bryce didn't turn his head. He didn't need to. His line of sight, motionless under the tall black bearskin hat, absorbed every micro-behavior he'd served under interior observation rotations for 3 years. He knew the difference between confident planning and covert adjustment. Camila walked straight to the front row. There were 4 nameplates arranged neatly on the polished oak chairs, one for the education minister, one for Princess Charlotte, one for Catherine, and one for the young patron. Until this morning, those last 2 had always been the same person. But now, Camila gave a nod. Her aide stepped forward and lifted the nameplate, reading, Princess Charlotte of Wales, traditional patron successor. A second aide, almost on reflex, slid a new one into place. Maya Astor, patron Dineen Bryce, saw it happen in real time. The ease, the speed, the practiced choreography of a decision that had been made long before this morning. One of the aides leaned in slightly toward the stage manager and said, "It's been adjusted. This is the final version. Use the new designation when prompted." The stage manager blinked. "Did this clear through Kensington?" The aide offered a polite, clipped smile. "It's been cleared. Please proceed as instructed." There was no further debate. Then came the second move. Camila surveyed the seating again, then made a small motion toward the side. "Can we move that second row chair?" she asked, gesturing toward Charlotte's original position. "Let's give the cameras a bit more depth. Don't want clutter in the frame." It was a photographer's trick, but Bryce knew better. The seat being moved wasn't random. It was the only chair that had been linked in every iteration of the program to Charlotte's symbolic place in the ceremony. As the staff shifted it back, a young girl entered through the northern corridor. Maya Astor, dressed in a soft mauve dress and white gloves, smiling she, and escorted by Camila's staff. She wore a sash, royal patron, children's literacy, stitched in gold thread, not yet announced, not yet formally granted, but worn nonetheless. It had not come from the Crown Wardrobe Office. Bryce clocked every stitch. The aides weren't nervous. That was what told him this wasn't a proposal. It was a plan already in motion, one step away from being irreversible. They entered with the kind of grace that didn't need fanfare. No trumpets, no staff procession, just a mother and daughter stepping through the West Corridor, like they had done so many times before. Princess Catherine, poised in a muted pastel blue coat dress with pearl buttons, offered a brief nod to the gathered guests as she walked, one hand resting lightly on her daughter's back. Charlotte walked beside her in matching tones, the hem of her pleated skirt falling just below her knees, her posture straight, every movement rehearsed but unforced. She had been raised for days like this, but even at 9 years old, she could feel the difference in the air. They reached the front row, and the hesitation came instantly. Charlotte's gaze swept the seats. Her name wasn't there. She didn't frown, didn't pout. She simply blinked once, then looked again. Her place had been beside her mother. Now it was gone. In its place sat a card that read Maya Astor Patron, Dine, and 1 row back. A single chair had been discreetly added with no nameplate at all. She looked up at her mother. Catherine followed her eyes. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers curled slightly around the clutch in her hand. She leaned toward the nearest aide and whispered, "Has the order changed?" The aide didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked toward the stage, then toward Camila, who now stood speaking with a press coordinator, as if nothing had shifted. After a beat, the aide replied in a tone that barely made sound. There was a late adjustment. It came directly from the consort's office. Catherine said nothing. She simply guided Charlotte to the second row and took her own seat, back straight, hands folded. From his post, Sergeant Harlan Bryce caught it all. The glance from Charlotte, the quiet ask, the non-answer, the lowering of a child's eyes, not in defeat, but confusion. A form of humiliation that didn't sting but hollowed. Camila approached a moment later, her heels clicking softly across the marble. Her expression was overly bright. Her voice dipped in the performance of warmth. "Isn't Maya looking just lovely today?" she said aloud. Not quite to Catherine, not quite to Charlotte. "She's our new little leader, so full of promise." Maya beamed. She curtsied too fast and too low. Overcoached, Camila's hand rested briefly on Maya's shoulder, presenting her forward as if she were a prize. Charlotte stood quietly, lips pressed together. She didn't flinch, but she looked toward Bryce, not in desperation, not in appeal, but in something harder to name, as if to say, "This doesn't feel right, does it?" Bryce didn't return the gaze directly, but he did one thing only a trained eye would notice. He shifted his stance just half an inch, placing the toe of his left boot in line with Charlotte's aisle. Protective, not reactive, and Catherine saw it. She said nothing, but her eyes briefly met Bryce's beneath the shadow of his bearskin hat. And in that single glance, the guard understood, noted, but not yet. When the press doors opened, the room transformed. What had been a quiet pre-event shuffle now gave way to the clicks and low whirs of camera shutters. A red velvet rope had been drawn to separate the back 3 rows from the front, not standard for an education patronage event, but no one questioned it aloud. The photographers took position in the southern alcove. Behind them, aides adjusted their posture, checked cords, and whispered final directions through earpieces. At the front, Camila stepped up to the carved lectern. She moved slowly, ceremonially, as if she were about to bestow a state honor, not announce an honorary youth patron. Her hands rested lightly on the folio in front of her, the gold-embossed cipher, catching the light as she opened the first page. "Good morning to all our educators, partners, and future visionaries," she began. Her voice had the precise lift of polished delivery, familiar to those who had seen her open garden parties and briefings. But the language this time was curated. As we look toward a modern crown, one that reflects not only the traditions we've inherited, but the inclusivity we aspire toward, we must ask ourselves, who are we raising to carry the torch? A few nods from the front row, polite, expected. Sergeant Harlan Bryce stood motionless beside the eastern archway, watching Camila more than listening to her. Every sentence so far had been a deflection, polished language that avoided what everyone in the room had noticed. There was no mention of Charlotte, no acknowledgement of the girl who had been the expected recipient of this symbolic title for over a year. The press pack had received early guidance. Photographs of Charlotte with children's books, mock headlines like "Princess picks her pages," all quietly approved by Kensington. And now it was as if none of it had ever existed. Camila continued, flipping to the next page with deliberate calm. "This morning, it gives me great joy to introduce someone new, someone with a deep love of reading, a fresh voice, and a face not often seen at the center of royal circles, but whose presence, I believe, reflects the openness this next chapter requires." She looked up directly at the cameras. "Maya Aita will be stepping forward today as our new young patron of children's literacy." There it was said out loud on record, under cameras, with no co-signature from Kensington, no appearance of the sovereign's office, no contextual disclaimer that this was honorary and non-binding. Charlotte sat perfectly still in the second row, her small hands folded over her lap. Her face betrayed nothing, but Bryce noted the slight tightening at her jaw. A child's dignity is often quiet.
It doesn't lash out. It holds. Catherine didn't blink. She watched Camila deliver the next paragraph about diversity of lineage and widening the circle of opportunity, with the same look she used during state visits, composed, elegant, and utterly unreadable. But Bryce, he felt his instincts switch. This was not just symbolic overreach. This was substitution, and not even subtle. Camila didn't hesitate. No transition, no deference, no ceremonial call to rise. Just a brief tilt of her head, and a small wave of her gloved fingers toward the second row. Maya, darling, come. The girl stood at once, clearly rehearsed, and took careful steps toward the stage, flanked by a palisade, with a velvet-lined presentation box. The cameras re-entered, as she reached the lectern, standing beside Camila, like a newly crowned heir.
She smiled, curtsied again. Too deeply. Camila gently corrected her posture, with a whisper and a hand on the shoulder. Then came the box. It opened with an audible click. Inside a custom sash of navy satin, its ends finished with hand-stitched gold fringe. The words embroidered in curling gold script left no ambiguity. Royal patron. Children's literacy. The crowd gave polite applause, unsure whether to stand. Most didn't. The etiquette was unclear. Even for a royal announcement, this had veered into strange territory, a crossover of public gesture and private appointment, held together only by Camila's authority in the moment. Camila took the sash and looped it slowly over Mia's shoulder, adjusting it as if preparing for a photograph that would be framed and issued to every schoolhouse in the kingdom. "There," she said softly into the microphone. Her voice honeyed. "Our newest face of literacy." A proud moment. The cameras clicked. Press lenses zoomed. Staff photographers repositioned. The sash shimmered under the stage lights. But in the second row, Charlotte sat frozen. She didn't cry. She didn't shift in her seat. She simply looked down. Sergeant Bryce saw it. Not the defeat, but the effort it took not to show it. Charlotte's fingers folded tighter into her lap. Her heels lifted off the floor for just a moment, then settled again, silent grounding. The posture of a child raised to hold the line, no matter what. A stage assistant leaned toward Catherine. "Could the princess step aside for a cleaner shot?" he whispered. Catherine's gaze went cold, but before she spoke, Sergeant Harlan Bryce shifted half a step, blocking him. Catherine's hand settled on Charlotte's shoulder, not to move her, but to keep her there. At the lectern, Camila praised books and legacy, while guiding her granddaughter, Maya, toward the ceremonial bookshelf. The sash across the girl's chest glittered under the lights, cameras lifting for the shot that would name her the crown's youngest literary ambassador. "Hold," the lead photographer said. A calm voice cut through the room. "Excuse me." Bryce hadn't moved from his post, but every head turned. "That patronage cannot be transferred without the sovereign's authorization." Silence fell. Camila hissed, "You are not cleared to speak." Bryce replied, "Steady. I'm upholding hereditary protocol, not personal appointments." The double doors opened. Prince William entered in a dark suit. No medals, only command. He skimmed the folios stamped with Camila's cipher, draft headlines, school campaigns. No sovereign seal, no Kensington sign-off, no mention of Charlotte. "This appointment is invalid," he said. "You replaced my daughter." In a smaller chamber afterward, with Charlotte seated beside her parents, and Bryce at attention behind them, a council officer confirmed there was no precedent for giving the title outside the heir's direct line. William ordered the record corrected, the patronage struck, and a public clarification issued. Then he turned to Bryce. No protocol had been broken. "From now on, you're assigned to Princess Charlotte on all literacy engagements." Later on the terrace, Charlotte stared toward the gardens. "Was I supposed to lose that title today?" she asked. Bryce answered, "No. Someone tried to take what was already yours." She nodded once, and walked on. He followed 4 paces behind, protective,